So, I thank God Brady's there for me to offload some of that stuff on, but I've had plenty of my own Albatross projects to work on. Cyborg.
Yeah, right. So why don't we talk about that one first?
Mm-hmm.
We've got kind of a little list here of some of the stuff y'all have put out recently that have, had some production stories behind them. And Cyborg seems to be one that I'm pretty sure, actually, the last time you were on the show, like maybe a year or more ago, you talked about Cyborg. I'm pretty sure you talked about it then, too.
I'm dying.
And you talked about the tapes in your closet and all of that shit.
Well,
so you're finally done with it.
I'm done with an asterisk.
Right.
Selby, the owner of Discotheque, still has to go over the disc. I've sent it to him, the final files, and he still has to make his one last big final check. And that disc is so complicated, I'm sure I missed something. So I might have to go back and make one tweak and resend the replication files to him. But I'm pretty sure I'm done.
Mm-hmm.
And
so what did this entail exactly?
Okay. So,
because I saw the boxes.
A year ago,
they took up like half your living room.
A year ago November, I came home from the gym. And apparently, Sony Pictures Television had the rights before, and they're the ones that put it on Toonami and everything. Mm-hmm. And they had dubbed it in half a dozen different languages. They had, closed captioned it the way Sony knew how to work at that time, which was, early 2000s. And so Selby just said, hey, Sony Pictures, can you just send Justin everything that you have for Cyborg? Here's his address. And they're like, sure. Come home, and I can't even see my front door. Like, boxes and boxes. It was over 1,000 tapes. And, of course, none of them are in any kind of order. They're just all in just completely random.
Over 1,000 tapes for 50 episodes. Or something.
51 episodes, yes. Yeah. I had versions in PAL, versions in NTSC, versions that are cropped to 4:3, versions that were widescreen, versions that were edited for television, versions that weren't, all possible combinations of that. Mm-hmm. In addition to that, I had copies made on Beta SP tapes for small markets that didn't have digital Betacam decks, because those were really expensive back then. Mm-hmm. I had versions that had the time code burned into the screen and were on those giant old 3/4-inch U-matic tapes that was basically used to scrub through and find time code, because we weren't at a point where people could scrub through video files on a computer yet, and that was how they spotted subtitles.
Oh my God.
I had these tapes that were called DA88 tapes, which were the old high 8mm camcorder tapes that were recorded in a way that instead of having video, they were 8 tracks of digital audio, because digital Betacam could only hold stereo. And so this was the only way to save a 5.1 track. Mm. Also had a bunch of burned CDs, CD-ROMs of the mix files that were mostly unreadable because they had used paper labels.
Oh my God. Holy cow.
Yeah.
So it's like a gigantic puzzle.
Pile of garbage that I literally, because I didn't have room in here, mm-hmm. I had to just take them all to my extra my extra space in the basement and pour them all out and just like sort through, because the label on these things are tiny, and it's not like they actually said NTSC or PAL on them. They said 525 or 625. 625 being PAL, 525 being NTSC.
Right.
And like this tiny, tiny text in this paragraph. So I literally had to go through and like look for that 1-digit difference.
Holy shit.
It took me 2 days to figure out what we had. But thank God there were also some, not all of the Japanese master tapes in there, mm-hmm. That I was able to use for the most part. And most of the Digibeta tapes were actually in pretty good shape. The English masters, however, did not have the Japanese credit roll, which is different every episode. Mm-hmm. And it did not have...
God. Holy shit.
It didn't have the Japanese opening theme, which I have a feeling some people might not like that much, but you got to have that.
Yeah.
Or the Japanese title screens.
Okay.
So the first, after figuring out where everything was, I was able to put the PAL tapes and the cropped 4x3 tapes aside and captured, thank God I have a Digibeta deck, captured all of the master tapes, the Japanese master tapes, and the English ones that I was missing the Japanese masters for. Mm-hmm. Then I was able to lay them all out in Adobe Premiere, and the tapes that I was missing, I was able to put back together again by ripping the Japanese DVDs and then plopping the footage from the English masters on top of those.
Yeah.
So once I had all that done...
Just an afternoon's work.
Okay. So once that was all done, I looked at the video, and I'm just like, this looks really bad. Because I was looking at some of the key art, and I realized, because the show was animated in 2001, same era as Fruits Basket.
Mm-hmm. Not a good year for animation.
No. And there are some scenes where it's just like, first of all, they didn't use anti-aliasing when they were drawing the line art. Mm-hmm. Like, it looks jaggy like an old, like a NES Super Nintendo game. Second of all, it was blurry because the first half of the show they mastered to the last highest quality analog videotape format, Beta SP, which means that it looked fairly sharp, but there was all this video noise, kind of like this layer of video noise on it, and also occasionally like you'd see a line across the screen, like a VHS type dropout.
Right, little tracking, something like that.
Yeah, just little stuff like that. Every once in a while, and I'm like, I can't really do much about that, but I can get rid of the video noise. So I threw a video noise filter over it just to get rid of that. Then I get to episode 27 or so. Mm-hmm. And from that point, they had switched equipment. I don't know exactly why this was done, but they had switched cheaper equipment. So they were going out through what appeared to be a shitty consumer composite video output card feeding into a D2 deck. D2 was digital technically, but it came in through composite analog. So even though there were none of those little like VHS style dropouts, the whole thing just got blurry and smeary, and there was dot curl and there was rainbowing. It just looked like someone had pulled it through a keyhole.
Right.
And like the colors were like smearing outside of their lines, and I did what I could. It's just I did what I could.
It looked acceptable to me. Like from what I expect from a DigiPaint show on Blu-ray, because you showed me a little bit of the footage.
Yeah,
and like Wolf's Rain looks like that on Blu-ray. Like
no, Wolf's Rain looks a little better.
It looks better than this, but it has
half.
that. It has that expected blurriness.
Sure,
I expect it to look like that.
And I feel like when they were producing the show, they expected the blurriness to take away from the jagginess.
Yeah, nope.
I feel like they were expecting the blurriness to really kind of mask how jaggy and nasty everything looked.
Yeah.
So anyway, after all the video was squared away, I was able to concentrate on the audio, and the audio was a mess. So I don't have a DA88 deck, and they're not very common. A lot of my friends that run dub studios like, NYAV and Bang Zoom, they have old DA88 decks laying around, but they don't have them connected. And because of how that technology all worked back then, it's not easy to connect it. Like, you need a physical Pro Tools rig to use them.
Oh, jeez.
So I'm just like, well, I can't do that. So I took it to this company in Burbank that was able to capture them all. And I had this giant box of them, of like all the 5.1 mixes for the Japanese and all the 5.1 mixes for the English. And I was missing a handful of the English ones, but I got most of them. And so they called me back when they were done, and they're like, look, DA88 tapes and 8mm tapes have not held up well, and these are no exception. And some of these we can't read at all. Some of these are just riddled with dropouts, especially early on the tapes. I'm like, okay, give me what you got. They hand me back the USB drive I gave them, and I'm looking at the WAV files that they sent me back, and I'm just like, oh my God, I can't use a lot of these. Like, so some of them, the tone at the beginning, it sounds like Morse code. It's a mess. It's just, there's nothing left. And so I'm like, okay, what do I do with this? The first half of the show, it wasn't a problem, because even though the American DVDs were only released to episode 8, the Australian DVDs went to episode 25, and we had copies of those.
Right.
So we were able to take the English 5.1, we would take the Japanese 5.1 off the Japanese DVDs, and the English 5.1 off those Australian DVDs. Some episodes were randomly missing the scenes.
Really?
Yes.
Holy shit.
Like
on those DVDs, there were randomly missing scenes?
A lot of times, like, the episode would start at the title screen when there was, like, whole scenes that took place before the title screen.
Oh, my God. This thing is just it's like coming across a car that has not been assembled. Like,
yeah.
All the pieces, it's like, here's your car. It's like, do you have a wrench?
So, and I go through every episode and I find the ones that are not put together, and for the first half of the show, I'm able to take the DVD rips and just plop them in and replace the bad parts.
Right.
Not ideal because the DVD audio is already compressed, and but you know what else?
You do what you got.
There's nothing else. Yeah. These don't exist in any other form. So then I get to the part where that was never released on English DVD.
Right.
And I'm just like, oh God,
yeah.
What do I do? And thank God there were only about 5 episodes that were not usable, and most of them were fine. So I was able to take those 5 episodes and I sent them to NYAV Post. I'm like, look, you guys have a 5.1 mix stage, and I know you have the plugins to make stereo into 5.1, into kind of a fake 5.1. Can you do this for me? And they're like, sure. So they turned it around pretty quick, and the end result actually is better than the original mix.
Wow.
In a lot of places, because one thing that I learned during the long and miserable QC process is that they were cutting every corner when they were dubbing this show.
Really?
There are lines where the audio's clipping that made it into the show. There are lines where where someone's cut off too abruptly. There's even a line late in the show, and this is like, we're talking past the point where they'd basically given up on Adult Swim, even, where a random line of dialogue comes from the back speakers.
Wow.
And I'm just like, did no one even check this?
Probably not.
Well, and the thing that kills me is that Sony paid through the nose for this. They spent so much money on this show. Just the tapes that were sent to me, new back then, would have been around $100,000 worth of tape stock.
What do you think the odds are that 2001 version of Cyborg 009 made $100,000 for anyone?
I mean, who the hell knows? But regardless, they, it's together. It's in the best shape I could possibly make it.
Yeah.
These discs are not my finest hour video quality wise.
But in a way, like, you sparkled, you spit shined it in as much as anyone could.
Zach, you can only put raw sewage through a Brita pitcher so many times.
Yeah, right.
Like, you can't. I mean, look,
if for whatever reason you're a big fan of the 2001 Cyborg 009 because you saw it on Adult Swim for the... What, did they show the whole thing on Adult Swim?
They showed all but the last 3 episodes. In those last 3 episodes, it appears that it's a story arc that the show got canceled and they were just kind of, flushing out the cash.
Yeah.
So I don't think that it doesn't really tell a whole complete story, but those last 3 episodes have never been aired. Well, they've never been seen in English ever.
Well, now you can.
Yep.
Thanks to you.
So we don't have a date on this just yet. Before that can happen, Selby has to get the artwork approved for the package and do a final check of the disc. But
pull quote: "What an exhausting nightmare." Justin Savakis.
Please make my pain end.
Anime News Network.
But look, I mean, I get the charm of the show. It is a charming show, and I get the nostalgia value. I'm just happy it's over. Those tapes landed on my doorstep November 2017.
Yeah.
This is the worst nightmare project I have ever worked on. And that's saying a lot.
Yeah, it is, considering.
I have done some garbage. I did the 2-disc special edition of MD Geist.
Yeah.
So, I'm happy it's over.
That's cool. No, it's a fascinating tale because it's amazing that you can take something that is just obviously just a wreckage. It's like you stumbled across just a wreckage, and it's like, turn this back into what it was originally, and it's like, The thing was, rigged together to begin with.
It was wreckage originally. This was meant for the, back in 2001, almost nobody even had an HD TV.
Yeah.